Hey guys, it's Miss Leandry, and we are on video 2 of the chemistry of life. Just to review, we kind of went over what the subatomic particles look like. So if you remember, you've got protons. Protons are found in the nucleus. They have a positive charge. They account for part of the mass of the nucleus. Then we also have the neutrons, which are also in the nucleus. They do not have a charge, but they both account for the mass of the atom. And then finally, we have the electron in a cloud outside of the nucleus of the atom. Those are relatively massless, meaning they don't really account for much of the mass. So all of the mass of an atom is really concentrated in the nucleus. And then the rest of it is mostly empty space. So that was just a quick review of what we went over in the last video. So now we're going to move on and let's talk about how we identify elements. So it's very important to note that the number of protons will determine which element it is. So if I look at this picture right here, how many protons are there? There's 1 and 2. So there are two protons in this element. And if I look on the periodic table and I look at element number 2, it is helium. So this element, this picture right here, is a picture of helium, an atom of helium. So we're going to go over that a little bit more, but I think that'll help a little bit. Now let's take a look at how to read the periodic table. This is something that you definitely need to know how to do. We went over it last year in 8th grade, so if this is review, that's great. If it's new to you, it'll be good for you to know this stuff. So the first thing you need to know is the atomic number. That's this right here. The atomic number of an element will tell you a couple things. First, it will tell you the number of protons. I've already stated that, right? So if you know how many protons there are, you just look up that number on the periodic table, and that will tell you the element. It will also tell you how many electrons are in it if it is neutral. Now, in this class, we're not going to really get into too much about ions. We're going to talk about them a little bit. Ions are atoms that have charges. For the most part, if I don't see anything, consider that it is neutral. Anything off the periodic table, we're going to assume is neutral, which means the number of protons equals the number of electrons. Therefore, you have a neutral atom. Okay. The next thing on the periodic table is the atomic weight or the atomic mass. Remember, I said the atomic mass is mostly found in the nucleus because that is where the proton and the neutron are. And so when we look at what the mass is of an atom, it is going to be the number of protons plus the number of neutrons, if you round it up. Now, some of you learned probably about average atomic mass. We're not going to talk about that in this class, so always round the atomic weight or the atomic mass to a whole number and then use that number. So this would be 16. Which means I know I have 8 protons, right? Because that is what the atomic number tells me. And if I take 8, this is hard to do. 16 is my mass, and I subtract 8, that will tell me how many neutrons I have. Okay? Don't always assume that it's going to be equal. Don't always assume that the atomic number is also the number of neutrons, because that isn't always the case. Then you have the symbol. So for oxygen, it is O. It's not always going to be the first letter of the name. So be aware of that, like sodium is actually Na. It's also important to notice that if an element has 2 letters in its symbol, the first letter is capitalized and then the second letter is not. So for example, neon would be N, capital N, and a little E. So that's a neon. Okay, I'm trying to think of another one. Sodium, you can see right here. Calcium is Ca. So the second letter is always lowercase. And then finally, we have the element name. Oops. And the names come from lots of different places. Sometimes they're named after the scientists that discovered it. Sometimes they'll be named after the places they were found. It could be a word in Latin that describes the element. So, the names and the symbols, you just have to learn them. I mean, the more you use the periodic table, the faster it comes to you. So, but that's how we get names. So Let's try some practice questions, okay? Sorry, I still have to clear this. All right, so here is a table I want you to fill out. So pause the video. This is also on your notes and also on Edpuzzle. So I want you to pause the video, fill out the table, and then come on back and I'll go over the answers. Okay, so this is pretty easy to fill out, and this is definitely something you need to know. So where is the proton found? We know it's found in the nucleus. Okay, so that's where that's found. We also know that we only have one left, and we know that that one is not found in the nucleus, but I'll wait to fill that in. What is the charge of a proton? We know that the charge of a proton is positive. Now let's go to neutrons. Neutrons are neutral. They're also found in the nucleus. Look at all those N's. That's pretty easy to say this is a neutron. Okay. And then finally, we have the last thing, which is electrons. Now, electrons are super important when it comes to chemical reactions. I think I mentioned that in the last video. And we're going to talk about that more when we get into reactions, but it's negative, and it is actually found outside of the nucleus. So that is what it should look like. Maybe different words, but that's what it should look like. Good job. And then if we go to the next slide, here's another practice question. So here is carbon off of the periodic table. So here are 4 questions I want you to answer. Let's see how you do. So pause the video, answer the questions, and then come on back. All right, so how'd you do? How many protons does carbon have? Remember I said that the number of protons is always equal to the atomic number. So in this case, the atomic number is 6. So therefore, it has 6 protons. What is its mass? It's right here. So the atomic mass, I'm going to round to 12. If you need help with rounding, just come talk to me during class and I'll go over the rounding rules. How many electrons does carbon have? And I said on here to assume that it's neutral. If I have 6 protons, right, that means I have 6 pluses. And if it's neutral, I have to have 6 negatives. So therefore, I have 6 electrons because those have to balance out in order for it to be neutral. And then finally, how many neutrons does carbon have? If you remember, the mass is equal to protons plus neutrons, okay? So we know that this equals 12. So the mass right here equals protons plus neutrons. Now I know I have 6 protons, so I can put 6 here. So I have 6 plus n equals 12. So all I gotta do is subtract. Oops, that should be a 12. So subtract 6, that means you have 6 neutrons. Hope that helps. That is the end of this video. Sorry about the spelling there. You will have some practice in class, but otherwise, that's it for this video. You guys have a great night.